There comes a time in every man's life when he has to look at himself and just wonder, how on earth did I get to where I am right now? And, well, okay, that's usually a lot more profound for a lot of people, but right now I'm just going to talk about how I became a fan of Pokemon. Unlike a lot of fans who started out playing Red and Blue, or one of the other early games, I got into the Pokemon series first through the anime. It was during Season 1, and I was watching episodes like Pikachu's Goodbye and Battle Aboard the Saint Anne, and those were awesome episodes. And at the time, I didn't really know that they were games. I just thought it was a fun TV show. But then, after I think it was about 6 months or so just watching the anime and having no idea about the games, I think it was on some Christmas day that I opened a present from, I think, my mother, and inside was a game called Pokemon Stadium, which just blew my mind because I never even knew that Pokemon were games, and yet here was a Pokemon game. Honestly, I thought it was based off the show and not the other way around. And I was ignorant back then. Internet wasn't exactly what it was today. Pokemon Stadium was a pretty fun game, but it was also a game that was extremely challenging for a youngin' like me. I didn't really know what strategy was, so I just picked a Pokemon that looked cool. And yeah, we didn't have Red or Blue, so they were all rental Pokemon. And rental Pokemon kinda suck. So yeah, I never really made it very far. I think I managed to make it to the Elite Four over years of playing the game, but I could never beat the Elite Four and Rival until several years later when I came back to the game and had a lot better understanding of strategy and was able to select rental Pokemon that were actually useful. The first real main series Pokemon game I played was Pokemon Emerald. Originally, I didn't own the game, my sister did, and sometimes when we were on long car trips or she was out doing something, she would let me play Emerald. She wouldn't let me save anything, of course, because there's only one save file on that game. When she was in sophomore year of high school and we would go on college tours and she was inside looking at a certain college, I would just sit in the car and play Emerald. I got really good at the very beginning of the game. There were points where I could make it all the way up to Brawly in less than an hour, which I don't know how good that is compared to the whole universe, but I think that's pretty good. But eventually, they saw that I really liked that game, but I could never save it and I could never complete it, so I got my own copy, which was really cool. And then I played that a lot, and I had fun with it a lot. The very first starter I picked, and the actual full game that I completed for the first time, was Mudkip. I don't remember which starter I chose the very first time I played the game, but Behemoth the Swampert is kind of an icon in my own mind. That game was just tons of fun. I still wasn't totally up to date with what strategy was, so I chose Pokemon partially that looked cool, and then there was a lot of trial and error in that very first playthrough, figuring out, okay, what might work and what might not. In the game, I didn't really farm out leveling very well, because when I got to the Elite Four, I had one level 94 Swampert, and everything else was about level 40. And, I thought I might be able to take on the Elite Four just with the Swampert. Yeah, that's not the case. Even with, all the Hyper Potions in the world, I still couldn't beat the Elite Four with just a Swampert. So I had to go back and take a month or so and train up my other Pokemon because I was so used to using Swampert that I just neglected them. But eventually, I did manage to beat the Elite Four with one Pokemon left at around 12 HP or so, and I was so excited. It was in the middle of a car trip, and then Wallace showed up. That was a really funny moment in retrospect, but that was the most devastating thing in the world, because I think I've been playing that game for close to 5 or 6 months, and I thought I'd finally beaten it, but nobody told me there was a champion after the Elite Four. I wish I'd kept Behemoth around, but unfortunately I didn't really know you could do that at the time, so I'm just okay, cool, I won, let's try a different starter. And so Behemoth was forever lost. So anyway, I didn't really play any more main series games for a while after that. I played Hey You Pikachu, I played basically all the N64 games. I played Pokemon Stadium 2, I played Puzzle League, I played Snap. Snap was a ton of fun. I really loved that game. And I really did get a 10,000 point Portrait of Mew once. And I got it printed at Blockbuster, but I lost it. Silly misplacing me. And Hey You Pikachu was fun as a kid. I always kind of knew that it wasn't the best game ever. I mean, it was fun because, you know, you were controlling Pikachu, but it was easy to get frustrated at, and I really can't recommend that game. And then Pokemon Stadium 2 was good. It fixed a lot of battling mechanics, it let Pokemon hold items, it made a lot of improvements Gen 2 had done, and so it was actually a lot easier than Pokemon Stadium 1. But for some reason, we could never get past Team Rocket on that game. Probably just because, you know, the explosion guy, kinda crazy. If we had known about ghost types back then, that might have helped, and how they're immune to explosion. Or there were also a couple of steel types that we probably could have used, but again, we went with ones that looked cool, and I guess I didn't think Gengar looked particularly cool back then. But anyway, the next game in the main series that I actually played was Pokemon Black. I kinda skipped over Gen 4, but then again, back then, I didn't know Gen 4 existed. This was just a present from my sister, I think, on maybe a birthday, and that one was really, really cool. I'd never heard of any of the Pokemon in the game because, again, internet wasn't exactly at my fingertips at the time, and of course they were all brand new in that game, at least until you beat the Elite Four. It was a brand new set of Pokemon, and that was amazing, because honestly, at that point, I thought every game in the series just had a new set of Pokemon, because I hadn't experienced a game where that was proven false yet. I mean, I knew that there were Pokemon that came earlier than Hoenn. I mean, I'd seen the anime, but, you know, it is just one of those things that you don't really comprehend until it's put in front of you. So anyway, Pokemon Black I thought was a really awesome game. It had a fantastic story, which I really loved, with this conflict between Anne and Ghetsis, and a lot of people seem to dislike Ghetsis. I respectfully disagree, but, you know, I know that's an unpopular opinion, so I'll just leave it at that. And I loved the music in that game, I loved all the different Pokemon. Some of my favorite Pokemon came out of that generation. At some point I also began briefly playing the trading card game, mostly with my sister because I didn't really know that tournaments existed and I didn't really know you could play it competitively and I didn't know anybody else who played it, so I just played it with my sister, and she usually beat me because she was older and had a better concept of how it was supposed to work. I mean, like, I understood the basics, but I never really got the whole strategy of it. Yeah, I just sort of fell off of that after a few years. Not really any particular reason, just losing to my sister all the time wasn't my favorite thing ever. It was also around this point that I stopped watching the anime, mostly because of Dawn. I hate Dawn. Oh my goodness, Dawn is so annoying. She's probably my most hated character in Pokemon. I'd still watched it, not religiously, but off and on between Johto and Hoenn, but as soon as Dawn showed up on the scene, I was out of there. And I didn't really get back into it until just like a few months ago, actually. Around this time, I started to realize that there are more games, and I started to have money, finally, and so I started to be able to get them for myself. So I played Heart Gold, I played Diamond, I played Pokemon Y, I played Alpha Sapphire, and I played the original Red, and I also played Leaf Green. And, you know, they're all super fun, and I really, really enjoyed them. But then a little something called spin-off fever, I like to call it, happened, where I got into a whole bunch of spin-off games in a row, because they said Pokemon on them. I played Battle Revolution, which sucked. I played both of the Mystery Dungeon games that were out at that time. I've gone on record saying that those are some of my favorite games, Explorers especially. Rescue Team not as much, but I still respect it for being a good game in its own right. And then we come to Mystery Dungeon Magnagate, which it tried to make Mystery Dungeon not Mystery Dungeon, and I really just couldn't get into it, basically at all. It tried to make Mystery Dungeon more of a dungeon crawler and less of a Pokemon game, I think. It's the best way to describe my feelings towards it. It tried to be something and it failed at it. And I guess I can respect that, but I just did not like that game at all. And you know what? I think that's about the end of my tale. I mean, there were other games. There were like the Ranger games when I played them. There was the Pokepark games and Coliseum and XD, which I actually didn't get to play until very recently. There's a Choose Your Own Adventure Pokemon book that I really enjoyed for a while. Pokemon board games, what I talked about in the last side video of this month. There were plushes that I hugged and tops that I spun, but for the most part, that's my story. So what are some of your experiences with the Pokemon franchise? Where did you first realize that you were a Poke fan? let me know, because I think it's really interesting. Everybody has a different story, everybody has a different point of view, and it's just really neat to hear how all these people have come together into this great fan base. In the meantime, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves.